Hey all, welcome to this episode of A Good Problem to Have. I'm your host, Tyler Olson. The thing I want to talk about today could certainly apply to all of you in medicine. However, I think it particularly applies to emergency medicine physicians, and that is the impact of lifestyle creep shortly after training is over with. Emergency medicine, from a financial standpoint, it has a unique sweet spot because training is not that long, but the attending pay range is pretty good. It can be quite good. And so that intersection of time investment for training and compensation is very appealing. Now, as you all know far better than I do, the lifestyle expectations of emergency medicine docs is very different from all other specialties. And so you've got to lean that way and be comfortable with it. And some who are, it's not just that they're comfortable with it, that they thrive in it. And that's why they chose EM, right? However, there is a higher than normal risk of that energy level continuing when you get into your 50s and 60s in particular. And so the lifestyle creep risk, while it can impact all of you docs, I wanted to share some things that I think will be of particular interest to emergency medicine doctors because the truth is, it is a young person's game. It is it's something that you can do. Obviously, there's emergency medicine doctors who are in their 60s and 70s. But boy, is it a lot of energy output, or so I'm told. So, yeah, I mean, lifestyle creep is something that needs attention from you all, but it's particularly different for emergency medicine doctors because of that, because the job gets harder to sustain over time. I mean, the challenges, the things that maybe you thought were totally fine, like working, nights, weekends, circadian rhythm disruption, having like a lot of activity, ebbs and flows, very volatile ups and downs in terms of busyness. That can become more and more challenging as you get older. And so the income that you're earning, that you're used to earning in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s, perhaps, the decisions that you make early on can impact what opportunities or time choice, career choice decisions are available to you as you get older. So let's talk about why this is it's tricky, why lifestyle creep is tricky, how to frame questions surrounding the financial decisions that you're going to make, and why this is so beneficial. So, why it's tricky, questions and framing to ask, and why taking these steps are beneficial, okay? So, the reason why this can get a bit tricky is because lifestyle creep is not usually noticeable. Sure, it can be, there's times when a doctor will show up and, she bought a G-Wagon, and you're like, whoa, that's a massive purchase, a big change from the 2010 Honda Accord that she had before, right? But in most cases, it's not that obvious. Little things where you're gradually just, we're going to spend more going out. We're going to spend more on DoorDash. We're going to spend more on getting a bigger apartment or buying a really, really expensive home. Not that it feels opulent just because home prices are so expensive. You can, suddenly you're in a 4x your annual income house. And it's tricky because those bigger steps of buying like a really massive home, they are usually preceded by smaller decisions that are gradually but still uncontrollably growing. And so you want to be mindful of these things. Um, now don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of spending money. I think you doctors should spend money, and I am not all of the opinion that you should live like a resident. Now, if you want to, because that's what you want to do, by all means. But I personally, that's not my bias at all. I think that you should find a way to find a balance, but you can't go too far in the other direction either, or else you could hurt yourself. So, yeah, you just have to think about it, because little things that are less noticeable, like better vacations, nicer dinners, opting in for more education costs if you've got kids, and maybe you think, I can work a couple extra shifts, and it's like that just pays for that extra thing that I want. But the reason why you have to be careful is because usually the question we ask ourselves when we are going to buy something, or we're going to pay for a service, or we're going to pay for an experience, is we ask the question, can I afford it? That's not the right question. The better question is, what does this commit me to? Right? What am I committing to when I buy this house? What am I committing to with my own emotional and mental expectations, or that of my family, that of my extended family, who kind of has the idea that maybe I'm going to start supporting them or making their life nicer because they know I'm making a higher income now. And maybe you feel rightly like you should do that because they supported you and they helped you earlier on. It can get a little bit challenging that way, because one thing is, it's one thing if it's just one thing, but it's never one thing that increases the financial pressure. It's usually multiple things. So we have to ask ourselves, what do these lifestyle choices, these expectation, foundational decisions, what are they committing me to? This house that I'm buying, or this car that I'm buying, how long is this committing me? And so those extra shifts, if you rationalize the decision because you're like, well, I can just, I'll work 1 or 2 extra shifts, and it's like, that's taken care of. And that may be true in the short term. You can afford it, but what is it committing you to? And can you really commit to that? So that's our second part. The right way to frame it is, what is this committing me to? Now, by doing this, by making this the framing of your decisions, so that you are thinking about commitment rather than affordability, this helps with flexibility and gives you decision freedom later on. You've got this time period right after training is over when you're still very used to a lower income, and you have an opportunity to set the bar where you wish to. It can be double what you were making before. It can be triple what you're making. If you're making 70, you could act as if you're living on 210 or 140 or whatever. Whatever you decide is the balance that helps you to increase your lifestyle to a reasonable degree while not going to a degree where you're overcommitting. That is the flexibility point, but it disappears very quickly. Whatever you set in stone through your decisions and newly established habits, that's going to be a very hard thing to change. So if you go all out and you overcommit, that's going to make it hard to reverse, and you've lost that flexibility. Whereas if you start intentionally, you increase your spending intentionally, you're creating that margin of cost of living with a much higher income. So the new cost of living is higher than what your residency income cost of living was, but still there's a gap, a good gap, between what it costs you to live and how much you're making. And now that extra can go toward your student loan plan. A lot of emergency medicine docs are not going for PSLF. You got to pay that sucker off, right? Having a reasonable retirement savings plan. If your program, or not your program, you're out of training now, right? If your employer has a 401k or 403b, that's great. If you're a 1099 subcontractor You can set yourself up with a solo 401k, possibly a cash balance plan. I don't know that that's something that may not. I shouldn't jump into that today, but it's that's a pros. There's a pros and cons list for that because your income needs to be pretty high for a cash balance plan to make sense. But at least a solo 401k and back to a Roth IRA, taxable investment account where money is going to specific places for long-term savings, but also for short-term savings, setting up a down payment for a home if that's what you want. Setting aside funds for a vacation, where you're giving your money a job. And so it's not just going into the checking account and then disappearing from there, because that's exactly what's going to happen if you're not intentional about this. That flexibility exists for a short period of time after your training. And like I said earlier, emergency medicine doctors, they have a hard time, most of them, from what I've heard, being able to maintain that same level of intensity. And what sort of level of shifts are you going to be taking when you're 61, 64, even possibly in your later mid 50s, depending on your health and your disposition, and your priorities. You have a lot of flexibility right now in determining how wide of a range you can choose to set those priorities. So, you use that plan then to save and create that flexibility later on. That's one of the benefits. Another benefit is that when you do spend, and it's organized, where this is a travel bucket, this is in a car replacement bucket. When it comes time to go on that trip, the money's right there. No guilt. It's great. It's so helpful to be able to have this organized in a way so that you're not just saving intentionally, you're spending intentionally, and it gives a lot of peace. This certainly applies to all of you physicians, but it's important, especially important for you emergency medicine doctors, to realize that, yes, this opportunity that you have, where relatively short training, I'm not saying it's short, 4 years of medical school and 3 or possibly 4 years of training that's quite a bit of time, but relative to your peers. And then you can be like, I can make 300, I can make 350, I can make 400,000. That can feel really great. It is an advantage in some ways, but you got to look at what's happening at the tail end of your career, okay? So let your life get better after training intentionally, and make it in a way that still allows you to use that gap, use that initial flexibility after training to really protect your decisions and protect your mind and your thinking later on, and give you a lot of joy and peace of mind in the spending that you get to do now and throughout your career and life. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening.